Okay, so before we move on to the 1950s, we're just going to sum up the 1940s so that if you do get the decades question on the 1940s, giving you a statement and asking you if this was the main cause, how far you agree if this was the main cause of tension between the superpowers in the 1940s, then you just know what we're talking about. So the things that we've got to talk about are the conferences, both Yalta and Potsdam in 1945. We've got the Iron Curtain speech and the tension created by criticising Stalin openly. Then we've got Soviet expansion, which is going on in Eastern Europe, where Stalin has got his Red Army there, and he's obviously starting to rebuild Eastern Europe as communist nations, which have no democracy. They're sort of forced into becoming communist nations against the will of the majority of the people, I'd imagine. And this starts to frighten the Americans, and he starts to solidify his control as well by introducing things like Cominform, the Communist Information Bureau, which is a way for politicians of these communist countries to talk to each other and be working together in Eastern Europe. He also introduces other measures to help these countries kind of cooperate with each other. We've got Comecon, which is the Communist Economic Bureau. So it's another way for Stalin really to control the economies of Eastern Europe. It's a response to the Marshall Plan. He can't really give out money. So what he does instead is he says we're going to work together, but really it's a way that he can direct their economies and make sure they work together according to his plan. And that prompts the Marshall Plan. That prompts the Truman Doctrine, which part of it is the Marshall Plan. The Truman Doctrine is the overall strategy. The strategy is we're going to contain communism. The Marshall Plan's one way of dealing with that, which is to give out money to countries to help them rebuild, basically meaning that poorer countries are going to think communism's a good idea, because if you're starving and your children are starving and you can't find a job, of course you're going to think it's great to sort of share out the wealth more equally because you've not got any and you're going to get some. Whereas if you've got a job and everything's going well and your children are doing okay and they're in school and there's healthcare and everything else because you've had money to rebuild, you're not going to think communism's that good. So you're not going to support it too much. So this was one of the ways of combating the spread of communism, but there were others as well. And then we go on to the Berlin blockade, where Stalin obviously blockaded the roads and the railways, and it was dealt with by the Berlin Airlift, which was where the British and Americans flew in supplies to West Berlin to stop Stalin going in with supplies, stop them asking for Stalin's help, because they know that Stalin, once he sends his soldiers into West Berlin, they'll never get them out, and that will just be spreading communism to West Berlin, and they want to keep West Berlin free of communism. So the airlift works, and after around a year, Stalin abandons this plan and opens up the railways and opens up the roads again and keeps them open. So this is the issue that they have obviously face. Is that the tensions caused by flying over the Soviet airspace, and by taking these supplies, they're taking a big risk that the Soviets won't just start shooting at them for doing so. So that leads us up to 1949, and that's when the Soviet Union get their own nuclear bomb, invent their own nuclear bomb. It's not tested in sense of dropped on a city or anything. It's tested in terms of it's well run out in the middle of a desert somewhere, and test that it works. So now it shows the Americans they've got to work harder and got to try and catch up on new technologies. And we could also have the creation of NATO in there, which is obviously this North Atlantic Treaty Organization, this military alliance of 12 countries, including America and Britain, designed to protect countries from aggression from Stalin and other communist countries. And the final bit is that during 1949, the communists in China win the civil war, create a communist government in China, and start rebuilding China as this new communist country, doing a deal the following year, actually in 1950, but it would lead to a deal with the Soviet Union. But the fact is that Truman Doctrine has been seen to have failed, and that's a big issue. They've got to make sure that they can't see it spreading elsewhere. So it means that Truman is going to be even more conscious about the spread of communism after the fall of what they call the fall of China.